David. Now, having said that, what future considerations do you think might be useful for the results? So how would we, once we get all this together, what are your ideas, your thoughts about how the results for this testing would be used?
So thank you everyone for joining and helping us kind of find out at least where you need solutions, even if we don't have the solutions at our fingertips today. I've already talked with a few school folks about just what a challenge, even before, last Friday when many of you all made the choice to close, what a challenge for everyone it would be to use the state assessments this year in light of the anxiety and uncertainty that was happening last week, let alone kind of the continued anxiety and uncertainty going forward. I mean, state tests tell us a lot of things in terms of how well some students do with particular areas of the content and curriculum, and we think that's really important. We also know at the State University that the events of the last couple of weeks have really, and the next couple of months, have really impacted what student performance may look like whenever those tests come about. And just logically, that would mean that the way they are used, I see one of the chat questions coming up about rechartering for next year. The way tests are used in a time of uncertainty, has to be reconsidered, and SUNY is doing that. And in fact, as we get through this all together, we don't have answers now, but as we get through this all together, we're going to reach out to all of you to understand, we're thinking about what reauthorizing would look like for us next year. But we certainly want to work with all of our school partners to make sure that we make the best decisions we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Another major theme of the questions we received is related to funding, and we certainly have a lot of those. David, can you share what you know now about any implications for schools and their funding? We got a lot of questions about the pupil funding.
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, this is a situation that continues to be fluid. We're working very closely with both the governor's office as well as the legislature regarding the implications of Executive Order 202.1 and 202.2, which were issued by the governor Friday and Saturday, respectively. We want to get clarity from the executive about the applicability of those two executive orders on charter schools. However, our understanding preliminarily is that it does apply to charter schools, that any charter schools that closed due to the mechanism stipulated in the executive order, so because of a state of emergency or because the school was directed to do so by the Department of Health, whether at the state or local level, that they will be eligible for the continuation of per pupil funding. In addition, we're also talking to districts across the state, and I'd say first and foremost with the New York City Department of Education, about ensuring that charter schools continue to receive per pupil funding until we can get clarity from some of the questions that we're asking. And so we highly encourage schools to first talk to their districts. We know that districts are in crisis mode as well, and so that might be challenging even at the best of times, but certainly at the present, and that they should continue to send the per pupil invoice to districts as they normally would. In addition, we strongly encourage all charter schools to continue to take attendance. And I saw Lisa from New American ask that question as well. But schools, as part of their education continuity plan, should have a mechanism by which they both track student participation as well as attendance, and that they maintain those records should there be a per pupil billing question. But we're doing everything that we can. And I know that, and these calls are jointly between us, New York City DOE, as well as SUNY. And so we're doing everything we can to ensure that that funding continues, that you're held harmless to the best of our ability for any decisions that you've made to put the health and safety of your students first. And we know that the legislature and executive feel the same as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Schools are concerned about fulfilling their obligations related to monthly board meetings and open meeting laws. Number of questions on that. Susie, can you share any guidance for SUNY authorized schools? David, can you do the same in terms of other recommendations or considerations?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, right now, the best resource for you, if you've not gone, if you don't know, and maybe we can put this on the follow-up, Unica, that you guys are doing with the group chat and listserv information push out, is the governor's executive order page. So the governor has released an executive order that allows for flexibility under the open meetings law. And the SUNY legal team is working on some guidance about that. You know, obviously if people are quarantined, it will be difficult to have them anywhere in a physical meeting, but online. And so a number of those things need to be navigated. I think a couple of things. One is if you are meeting remotely, certainly we would like to know that you are having those meetings broadcast online, even if it's a Zoom meeting like this. And there are other web packages that allow you to do the meeting, record them, and repost them. And so we're happy to send whatever resources we might have to kind of out to this group for that. You want to, as David suggested, again, about attendance, also keep pretty good records about what you're doing, who was there, what were the decisions you made, if you needed to take a vote outside of public space. Some really clear narrative around why the need to take that vote outside of the public space at that time. If there are votes that can wait until such time as you can meet publicly, we would suggest that as a best practice. But we also understand that the normal business of schooling is going on. And if you err on the side of, you know, Florida calls their open meetings law, the sunshine law, if you err on the side of thinking, how do we bring some sunshine to the Empire State and put as much of your information out there and make as much of it as widely available to the public and your families as possible online, we think that'll be important. It also might be an opportunity for them to continue to see the leadership at your schools, kind of thinking forward for the future and answering some questions they might have. So if we can offer any supports, we're somewhat proficient. I wouldn't say we're the biggest experts, but somewhat proficient at online meetings. We're happy to do that. Reach out to us at any time. Happy to help.
I would echo 100% what Susie said. I'd say everything that Susie said also applies to Board of Regents authorized charter schools. And I think Susie would agree that we need strong governance and we need strong leadership now more than ever. And so we would strongly encourage your boards to continue to meet using those flexibilities so that they can continue to do the business of schooling, as Susie said.
Great. Thank you both again. Both SUNY and SED have requested that schools update them about their online and other distance learning resources. Do these require approval for online learning or other supplemental instruction?
Well, we're not requiring, we are not approving or not approving any of the supplementary instruction. We asked all of our schools to let us know. It appears that it's kind of falling into four buckets. One of them is, you know, for some of the schools that it had originally said, well, we think we're only going to take 2 weeks. It was, we'll just take a break and figure out how many days we extend. I think that's shifting. And so whether or not they stay there, it's to be determined. And that's fine. We ask that our schools just keep us up to date. Some schools have worked or are working to send textbooks, readers, packets, for lack of a more sophisticated term. My apologies. I'll take all of your good terminology if you want to share it with us. Packets home. And then we have a category for kind of online learning assignments that are not necessarily teacher directed. but maybe teacher followed up on. So I know I think we put on our website, but the New York Times has a really great super set of writing prompts for students. If teachers are kind of sending out daily emails saying this, that, or the other, that's a little teacher directed. And then there are some of our schools that are doing full online learning, with Zoom, Google Hangout, et cetera, strategies. So we're just trying to keep track of those 4 buckets. The advice or request that we're asking schools is, and we have some schools that have, some populations of kids that they're going to contact not in person, but maybe again over video, very individually. What we've asked is, as David said earlier, ask your teachers to keep really great records. I'm sure you all have systems for this. Some of the full online packages keep track of what teachers and what students are together all the time. If you're doing kind of more online, sort of teacher directed, but not constantly monitored, ask your teachers to keep track of how many students they're having contact with during the day, what kind of experiences they are keeping, because we don't know, and if David knows, I'm sure he'll tell us, but nobody knows now really what we're going to look at 6 to 8 weeks from now. And so the better data and the more information you keep now, the more we can answer questions and advocate once we're through this crisis that instruction and learning was going on and these days should count. So the more data you can keep gathering for everyone, the better I think we'll all be prepared to advocate for all the great things you're doing for kids.
I would, again, wholeheartedly agree with what Susie said, and I would say it also applies to Board of Regents authorized charter schools. We don't know what will be in 6 to 8 weeks, but in terms of ensuring that we can make a strong argument that you've been engaged in the work of education, if there are any per pupil billing questions, is really important to us, and I know that's important to you. So to make sure you're keeping those records, but also the students that you're educating are going to come back to your building at some point, and you're going to need to hit the ground running. And so it benefits your students and it benefits your schools in order to make sure that these programs are robust, and that you're still checking for understanding, that you're providing support to students who need support, to continue to do that. One thing that I would really encourage the advocacy organizations, including the Charter School Association, to do is to see how they can serve as a conduit for sharing resources and best practices along the lines of distance learning in the short term. And so I know that some schools are putting these modules online for public access, like Success Academy. I know that some of the schools we authorize in Syracuse and down in the Bronx are willing to share. So I hope that that Yumika and Anna, that you'll consider how can you serve as a conduit for some of these resources for people who might want to look at them.
David, thank you for that, for the answer and for the opportunity to plug again. As I said, following this call, we will be posting our online forums listserv, and that's exactly where you can share best practice, answer questions, compare notes, share resources, etc. So definitely we will have that, and we'll have it today.
Great.
Great. Okay, finally, schools are wondering about their lotteries. Can you both share your guidance, what guidance you have on lotteries?
Yeah, so the law says that if you have more applications than seats on April 1st, then you need to hold a lottery. There's nothing in the executive orders that have changed that. We still expect that schools that receive more applications than they have seats available by April 1st will hold a lottery. What does change is the public officers law that requires you to hold the lottery in public space. The school should utilize the flexibilities under that executive order so that the lottery is still being held, but doesn't necessarily have to be held in with people attending. You should still provide notice about the lottery in accordance with the public officers law. So that's noticed in the news media, posted in at your school location, on your website. In addition, you should think outside the box and consider live streaming the lottery, recording it by other means. If you do that, though, you should make sure that it is posted on your website, that a recording is made, and that it's later transcribed. And that way we can make sure that the lottery is still a transparent, open process. If you do want to change your lottery date and your Board of Regents authorized, you should just reach out to your liaison or email us at our email address, and that's been messaged out about a change in the lottery. But we still anticipate that school will occur as scheduled starting in the 2021 school year, and parents are anxious and students are anxious to know if they've got in or not. So we do encourage schools to continue having the lottery, holding the lottery, and proceeding as normal, given the flexibilities they now have under the governor's orders.
I would say the Institute concurs. And in fact, this is another place where the Institute's legal counsel has prepared some, I don't know, a brief on it. And if it's not on our website, we have a special, it's www.newyorkcharters/coronavirus. And we'll post this up here in terms of flexibility. I think our charter agreement has a lottery date in it, and we are allowing flexibility around that date, given all of the difficulties around convening a meeting.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, before I turn it over to Anna to ask some of the questions that have come through, we have questions that were emailed to us previously. We have, as everyone can see, a number of questions coming through the chat. I wanted to allow you, Susie and David, an opportunity if you wanted to take it to ask, to say anything that wasn't asked in these questions so far.
Well, I think Steve Evangelista wanted to clarify what I said about board meetings. So, listen, absolutely, the governor's opportunity for having folks vote telephonically is completely allowable. I think, my comments were intended in the spirit of, to the extent that you can do video meetings and let people see and watch what's going on. We just think that's a better practice in this time because the parents will be interested in the determinations the board is making.
Okay, great. David?
I would just thank everyone for doing this difficult work. As I said before, the guidance is still forthcoming. For example, we don't have a lot of answers, and I see a lot of questions in the chat regarding the provision of services for students with disabilities. That's something that we're working on with our colleagues here in New York, including SUNY, as well as in Washington, D.C., and the guidance will be forthcoming. Until such time, we would say do the best you can in a very difficult situation. I don't think anyone will take umbrage at schools thinking outside the box and providing supports, whether they be remotely or through some other means, to schools, to students in our schools.
Okay.
Can I hop on Teresa, I don't know if you're SUNY authorized or state ed authorized, but I think most of you that might have had some sort of SUNY authorized visit scheduled between now and May, I believe the team has communicated, or they're going to communicate out with you that while I know you would love us to come visit your schools while you're not there, we're not going to. So we won't be conducting those visits. We may be tagging with some of you, but that right now should be the least of your concerns.
Yeah, I would agree, and we're thinking about how we continue to provide monitoring and oversight in this new environment. And does that mean more phone calls and conversations about plans for the future, which is great because we oftentimes we don't get to have those types of conversations because we're putting out fires. So we will be in touch, but similarly, and we've messaged out to all of our schools as well that we will be canceling our visits for the foreseeable future, and we'll be in touch when that changes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Now I'm going to turn it over to Anna, who's been monitoring the questions that have come in and handling the questions that came in earlier. Anna?
Thanks, Yumika. And thank you again, David and Susie. Really, really appreciate you all taking the time. And to all of you who have joined, really appreciate the time and consideration that you all are putting into this issue. We know that this is an incredibly uncertain time, and one of the most important places for students and their families is their school. And so being as thoughtful as you are and as concerned as you are is a testament to all of you and to your schools. And so with that, before I dive into specific questions, I want to give two broad statements, and David and Susie, you can feel free to disagree with the association's guidance at this moment. But I just want to underscore a theme that I think that I've heard from both David and Susie that has also been a theme in the guidance that we've been given, that we've been giving to schools, which is these are uncharted waters. If you do your absolute best to do right by students and their families, and you take care to document what those things are so that you can subsequently demonstrate the care and attention that you have paid to their needs in this difficult time, we have confidence that we will be able to navigate all of these situations. And so then the second global thing that I would reiterate that Yumika also said is that we will be launching a listserv following this call for people to have as a resource, to be resources to each other. Because a lot of the questions, and I will go through the questions in the chat, there aren't good answers to. There are no exemplars right now in this situation for things like distance learning. There are not great models, and to the extent that there are, we are doing our best as are both authorizers to make them available to you, but you all will be each other's best resources in this moment. And so we want to make available a forum where you can ask those questions, compare notes, make recommendations about things like free Wi-Fi, as I saw someone ask, or templates or models for other sorts of things around distance learning in particular. So with those two global observations, I will dive in to some of the specific questions. Now, David and Susie can also see these questions, and so if there are super specific questions to your school, I may have already responded to you offline. But I think one theme that is really popping later on in the chat is this question about, apparently, David, you had a portal deadline this week, later on this week. Is that something that you will still be concerned about?
So that was in connection with our midterm site visits, and Vicki Smith and Barbara Mazinski from my office are communicating out to schools that we are extending that deadline by 2 weeks, and then we will proceed from there. However, we do expect now, these are documents that schools should have prepared already, and so it probably will not be something that will drop completely. But we are giving schools more time given the situation that you're dealing with.
Thank you. And so a couple of other technical questions, and I'm going to look at you, David, around, because, and I say this in part because you and I have already corresponded on this and some related sort of weedy situations. One is around the April 1st transportation deadline, and the other a question around schools that are not yet open, whether there will be any implications for them or things they should be thinking about in terms of delayed timing.
Good questions. And so we forwarded on a list of regulations and laws that we would like the executive to consider in their decision-making process as they're issuing executive orders, and the April 1st transportation deadline was one of them, although we do not have further information about that at the present. And I'm sorry, Anna, what was the second part of that?
Around schools that are not yet open. And Susie, this would be to you as well. Any implications, things that they should be thinking about when and if they should start contemplating or having conversations with you all about delayed opening?
I think they should have conversations with their authorizer on an ongoing basis. Like the transportation, the April 1st question, we're getting additional guidance, but there's still an educational need in this state for high quality schools. So that should be a point of consideration. And to the best of their ability, schools should talk to their districts about flexibilities so that it doesn't have to be just a mandate from the state. We highly encourage schools to at least try to speak to the district to see if any flexibilities can be reached before the April 1st deadline comes and goes.
Susie, any thoughts on that?
I guess the one thing I would say is, if you think you're going to have an issue with opening, and definitely with transportation, you know, the districts are, many of them, in the same fluid situation that we are in. So email us. Let me just kind of say this to everybody who's authorized by SUNY. Shortly before this call, we got notice from SUNY that folks are working remotely after today. So we are all set up to do that. But the one piece I would say is email us first, because the one thing I'm not really sure about is how one main line can properly disperse all of the phone calls to each individual. If you find yourself in that situation where you are about to open next year and are running into some of these barriers, do reach out to us, at least let us know by email so that we can begin to aggregate up. Because while I agree, you all may have individual relationships with districts, certainly, you know, Rochester, Buffalo, Albany, other places that the Institute might not have. Understanding the number of individual schools or groups of schools and children that this impacts, maybe we can help make this issue rise to the top of a very crowded pool, given coronavirus. So that's the one thing. Yes, I agree with David. It's great if you can create the relationships with your districts, but if they are busy doing other things, maybe if we have strength in numbers, we can encourage them to kind of get on the phone with us and solve some of these challenges.
Great, thanks to you both. We have a handful of DOE specific questions that I will field collectively, but I will also give a nod to our friends from the New York City Charter Center who are on the call, listening in, paying close attention. We have been working in collaboration with them, and I know that they are planning further outreach later this week. Certainly, the decision to close New York City schools came relatively recently, and I think even the DOE is working manically to figure out the implications. So the categories of questions I'm seeing related to DOE schools are about access to buildings, food service, and food service in particular. Our understanding as of right now is that any student can go to any food service site in New York City and receive food. They do not have to go specifically to their own school, although the DOE has flagged that that may change. And so I would encourage you to be on the lookout for communications from the New York City Department of Ed and from the New York City Charter Center, as well as a DOE specific conversation that I believe the Charter Center is planning to have with schools later on in this week, not to put them on the spot, those of you who are listening in. In terms of access to buildings, the students won't have access. I personally would encourage you to be in contact with the co-located schools in your building, because the significant variable is likely going to be any other purposes that the building is being put to, which will vary school by school, as well as any other central staff, support staff, janitorial staff that may or may not be available given their own personal circumstances and work restrictions. And to that end, I would say that that is equally relevant for the person who asked the question about if someone else was diagnosed in the building and what cleaning will be going on. That will be taken care of by the DOE, and you should be in touch with the folks that are specifically related to your building. Some other questions. Sorry, I lost track of my lost track of the question thread. Folks are asking a lot of questions, and so I just, at the risk of circling back around this idea of amount of instruction. And so Susie and David, you sort of both talked about a little bit about keeping track and just in some ways being, you know, forewarned is forearmed. in terms of documenting what it is that schools are doing. Is there guidance right now that you all would be willing to give, or is your guidance to do your best and keep track? And would you anticipate at any point that that might change?
So I just want to be very clear that remote instruction does not substitute for in-person seat time. Remote instruction is a way for you to maintain a connection with your school community and your students, to ensure that we continue to close the achievement gap, and to make sure that when students come back to your buildings, they're ready to continue to learn and hit the ground running. The flexibilities afforded to charter schools regarding the 180-day requirement and the continuation of per pupil funding, as enumerated in Executive Order 202.1, is a blanket waiver process where we're still working out the details of how that will actually work. But as of right now, because the instructional seat time requirements does not extend to online learning, we don't have guidance per se. Now that may change. The situation is fluid. However, we entrust you as educators to determine how you can maximize the instructional time that you're providing to students during this difficult process, these difficult times, and that serves a number of purposes I said before, as well as students are scared, students are bored at home, and we want to make sure that we can continue to keep them occupied and that we can address their social emotional learning. And it's also just the right thing to do. But from our point of view as an authorizer, we would put those seat time requirements for distance learning in the hands of the educators for now. And if that changes, we'll communicate it out.
I would echo the last part of what David said. You know, SUNY doesn't set the final decisions about days of instruction or hours of instruction or instructional time. But what we do is, as David suggested, completely support our schools. Many of our schools have heard me say this a bunch. You know, we granted charters because we want you to be super strong and successful schools. And so in a world that none of us imagined, even, you know, I don't know, probably last November, certainly not at Thanksgiving, didn't imagine a world like this. We want to make sure, that's why we're asking folks what they're up to. We think you're smart and strong folks and you're doing great things for kids and you'll keep doing it. The more information you give us, the better we can all do together to advocate. And by the way, the districts are in this same situation. So if you have any questions about it, if you're specific to us and you have any questions about it, feel free and reach out.
So another theme that's coming through, and so I just want to hit, I want to sort of state a fact that I'm chatting to some folks privately, but the 180-day requirement was waived. And so folks who are concerned about, I'm getting some questions about going into the summer, things like that. The 180-day requirement was waived, but, and this is where David and Susie, I'd love for you to weigh in, because I had a version of this conversation earlier with Susie around the advisability of planning to go into the summer and any potential complexity about planning days that actually would take place in what is technically a next fiscal year. So David, Susie, thoughts on that?
I would just, I just want to just say, just to clarify what Anna said, sorry to interrupt Susie, the 180-day requirement was not waived. A waiver I know it might sound like semantics, but a waiver process was created. And there's some rules and requirements around that, and we're working those out, but there's not a blanket waiver. So I just want to be clear about that. But sorry for interrupting, Susie, go ahead.
I'm glad you're the one that has to navigate through all of that and not us. Right, so July 1 is the new fiscal year. If they're, because we talked to a couple of schools that had kind of tagged with teachers to see if they were interested in tacking days onto their regular calendar, what that would look like, et cetera. You know, we want to make it work as much as we can for you because it trips over into a new fiscal year. What I didn't have the chance today to do was touch base with our finance folks and see what they thought the implications were on that. Again, if that's one of the things you end up considering doing, we'll work on some guidance around that. Tag with us, let us know. We'll make sure to keep you in the loop.
And I would echo that. You know, as charter schools, you have a tremendous amount of flexibility in terms of how you structure your school year and your school days. And I think your first and foremost obligation is to make sure that your students not only are happy and healthy and that their social emotional needs are attended to, but also that you continue to close the achievement gap. And so, you know, more information to be you know, is forthcoming, but if schools feel that they need to change their calendar so that they can ensure that their students are continuing to work towards college and career readiness, that's something that we would welcome, although not something that we're mandating at the present time.
Thanks, guys. And we continue to see questions. I mean, this is, I love this group of rule followers here, folks wanting rules and requirements in particular, it seems like around this distance learning. So let me say what my advice would be, and David and Susie, you can check us on it. If your teachers are doing things like making phone calls and outreach to students or engaging with them anyway, make sure that they have a tracker that shows how often they're doing it and potentially to what outcome. And if you go so far as, for example, to prioritize specific students to make a note as to why that is and if they're getting additional time and attention. David and Susie, any other recommendations that you all would make?
I would say, in addition, so I really want to thank the association for providing the forum for best practice pieces. In general, I'm looking at some of the questions too. Do we need to speak individually with kids? How many times a week? Is a phone call better than a Zoom meeting or a Google Hangout meeting, or I don't know, pick your tool. Right now, we don't have any, right now we have less understanding about what best practices will be than I think we will in another week and another week and another week. We all know there are online platforms that give you kind of real-time live data about when your kids are online and what your teachers are doing. They will keep that and aggregate that up for you. That is not what we are mandated at all. I think some of our schools are doing that. Others of our schools, as I said before, you know, I think most everybody's filing in this blended sort of, here's some packets that we're going to do, and here's either group emails or some sort of web interaction, or maybe by phone. I haven't heard that, but I'm going to underscore what we've said 3 times before. Make sure that you keep track of it. I also think we may, over the next couple of weeks, if this really goes on for 6 to 8 weeks, we may, over the next couple of weeks, begin to see some practices emerging that we think are potentially strong, and we'll push them out. It is an unprecedented situation. We may, as I say this seems like a pretty reasonable step to do, and wouldn't take extra technology for kids or other things that are often barriers. So we may push those out and say this might be something to consider. But right now, SUNY has no plans to have some set of standards about the online learning that your children have during this period.
Great.
And I would agree with that.
Great. So Barb and Rafiq are asking questions about creative resources. I don't know. I think I'm going to give another plug for our listserv, because I don't think that there are clear answers to that right now. I don't think David and Susie, unless you all should correct me if I'm wrong, have a secret pot of money that might be magically made available in these moments for things like technical expansion of things like distance learning resources. But we will also, like I said, be launching a listserv And I think, Barb, that will give some resources around potentially not online things, and potentially, Rafiq, also the opportunity to collaborate around other funding opportunities, and we're happy to help with that. I think that a big takeaway here is also that there are a lot of outstanding questions about lots of things. This will continue to evolve. I, in particular, would highlight this question around students with special needs. I think that's top of mind for everyone, and in some ways the most complex question to answer. And so I would expect that we will have another engagement like this, but we'll also continue to make resources available on our website. We have COVID-specific resource page, including information about free Wi-Fi that you can make available to families, as well as the forum that we'll be launching for school leaders to compare notes. So if, for example, you have a fantastic student engagement tracker that you're using along the lines of all these questions about tracking student engagement and outreach in this time, that would be something that folks could ask for and share there. Or if there are common needs that are not being addressed, we will work with other advocacy partners to make sure that they are. We are going to excerpt all of the chat questions and make sure that they 100% got answered. And so Allison, you and others are asking about the DOE, and I would say again that I believe that there will be a conversation later this week hosted by the Charter Center. We're certainly happy to help in any way, but knowing that they have that in the works and that the DOE is really working incredibly hard under a very tight time constraint in terms of when their closure was announced. I know that that is a work in progress. I would also say I don't know if anyone is buying 25,000 laptops a day. I think I would be, one of the reasons that we wanted to host this conversation and provide these forums is because there have been so many rumors and a lot of disinformation that I think has made the situation even more stressful and complicated for folks. So I would encourage you, as Susie and David have said earlier, be in touch with your authorizers, be in touch with us, be in touch with other advocacy groups. We're all working hard to make sure that everyone has accurate and timely information that they need. And apparently the rumors go on, 300,000 iPads, even though Apple's closed.
I just want to respond to a question that Ali Keel from Community Roots asked about being DOE authorized. So my office and Susie's office has a call every single day with New York City DOE. And while I can't speak for them, I don't think anything that we've said in this call deviates wildly from their take as an authorizer. And I would encourage you to reach out to Lori Hazley, but Ali, if you do have any specific questions, we'd also be happy to facilitate that as well. So that's
Great.
that.
Well, thank you, everyone. Yomika, I'll turn it back over to you just to close us out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating in the call today. These were great questions. Thank you so much to David and Susie, and to you, Anna, for championing through those last bits of questions. This has been great, I think, just based on the questions that came through. More to come. Please, please, please sign up and follow our forum. Go on there, share resources, ask questions. Stay tuned as well. We will put up any information that connects to both SED and SUNY, taking your great lead, Susie, saying look to our site. So we will post that for folks so they can see that, and stay tuned.
Hey, can we do this? Can we just do this more after the coronavirus is over? Because I get to see so many faces all at once. This is pretty darn exciting. So, hi, everyone. Please reach out. Don't be a stranger. We are going to be great for kids because you guys are really, really dedicated to making super decisions. So thanks to the association for including us.
Happy to do it, and be on the lookout. We will be happy to do it again.
Thank you.
Be well, everyone.